I've roasted the lore of every loyalist first found in chapter as part of an ongoing series called X Faction is Stupid. Actually, a series where I'm determined to make you remember that 40k is meant to be fun, that we're meant to be able to laugh at it, and that your faction is not meant to be your personality. Whilst there are many more factions to go, I thought I would collect each of the first found in Space Marine videos into one Supercut mega video. Partly because I love those videos from other YouTubers to have on in the background when I'm hobbying, and partly because here in the UK there's this weird scary giant yellow thing in the sky, and as a ginger Welshman it immediately melts me into a puddle. Since I'm a benevolent chaos god, I have chopped out my silly intro song on each of these videos. I will, however, submit you to it one time, because I have to get my jollies somehow. So, on with a supercut of a series I like to call
I'm insulting your army till you remember it's funny. 40k is satire.
The Dark Angels.
Yes, I know, my voice brings all the Dark Angels to the yard. Speaking of which, let's start with the first, because God knows they don't let us forget their first. The Dark Angels, or as I like to call them, the low-hanging fruit. Yes, we've all seen the memes. They're traitors. Ha ha. Very funny. Except these medieval knights cosplayers bloody well are. No, not for Luther's Rebellion. That's ancient history at this point. And I'll be doing 30k Legions another time. And not for the Lion being tardy to terror. I'll be doing Primarchs too. No, the Dark Angels really are utter bloody traitors because they will destroy any part of the Imperium just for getting a whiff of an apron of a barmaid who once knew a dog that was taken for a walk by the brother of someone who went to school with someone with the nickname Fallen Frank. Think I'm exaggerating? Let's ask the walking war crime that is Interrogator Chaplain Asmodai. Asmodai, it's been suggested that you get overzealous when chasing the Fallen. How do you defend yourself?
I'd kill 50,000 loyalists if it meant capturing one traitor.
That's hypothetical, right?
Well, it would have to be a different 50,000. The last lot are already dead. How did you know of the Fallen?
Let's end this interview right here. A quick note to say that this script contains spoilers for books in the Legends of the Dark Angels omnibus. It also hints at some other books, but doesn't spoil them. Ah, I hear you all cry. That interview is just one example. Okay, weird voices that can't tell I was voicing both parts. How about the time that the Dark Angels were working with the Silver Eagles Space Marine chapter in a campaign versus the Orcs, when Asmodai got a whiff of that barmaid's apron again and took the entire Dark Angel force hunting down a supposed powerful warrior. This sudden relocation of the Grumpy Eagles left the Silver Eagles' left flank exposed, and quickly became surrounded by the walking toadstools that are the Orcs. They lost half their Marines to the green football hooligans. To top it all off, that warrior turned out to be an Inquisitor, not one of the Fallen. But, you half-witted voices moan, that's just Asmodai. He's a lunatic. Not all Dark Angels are like him. No? How about the Inner Circle, meaning those that know of the Fallen, more on that later, such as the Dark Angel's apothecary Nestor. Nestor was willing to let an entire planet die from a virus, just so he could dress up in his bedsheets and chase some Fallen and Geneseed. An entire bloody planet. And one that the Dark Angels had pledged to defend. Or when Azrael killed the Imperial Lord Commander Thaddeus Absalom, commanding officer of over 100,000 guardsmen, and who had just saved the Chief Curtain Wearer's life. After offing Thaddeus, Azrael then ordered the killing of an entire squadron of Imperial Guard, who they had been serving with, who had proven to be loyal and of good quality, and they killed them not just for being there to see a member of the Fallen, but because Azrael put them in a position to see a member of the Fallen. He, in essence, told them a secret and then killed them for knowing that secret. You know, the cliched line from spy movies, I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you, taken both literally and without option, to guard high command. Or The Angels of Retribution, one of the Unforgiven chapters. The Unforgiven are successor chapters that work so closely with the unlit biblically inaccurates that they may as well still be Dark Angels. Indeed, the Inquisition suspects that they're essentially still working as a legion rather than individual chapters. They even still share the same tailor. These supposed embodiments of the Emperor's wrath are utterly notorious for abandoning their allies mid-battle all the time, to the point that other Imperial factions will turn down help from them, because they know it's better to not have an ally than one who decides that this area doesn't really need protecting right now and that they've got better places to be. or when the Dark Angels were helping the Imperial defenders on Vigilus, when, mid-battle, the Raven Wing attacked the White Scars and then swan off chasing, well, you get the idea. Now I think about it, maybe the reason they wear robes is so they can flounce off quite so spectacularly. You just can't get a dramatic swish with power armour. Honestly, how is it the Alpha Legion gets the "I don't know which side I'm on" meme? Even when the Beach Towel brothers aren't buggering off mid-battle, you can hardly rely on them. They turn up, don't tell you what they're doing, complete their own objectives, and then sod off again. Utterly bloody dangerous in war. But they don't share any of that tactical genius with people who could actually use some help. It's a Spartan myth all over again. Not that they have much tactical genius to spare, so I suppose the Imperium should be grateful that these tactically illiterate bathrobe botherers don't play nicely with others. Alright, these strange voices in my head ask, so the Nocturnal Seraphim are useless allies who leave others to die? They'll kill loyalists by the tens of thousands, just because they can't be bothered to do their job and hunt out traitors, but surely they're still a useful weapon for the Emperor. Oh, by the Emperor's shriveled sack, no. Oh, they tell us of their tactical genius in service to the Emperor all the time, but dear holy saints are they not? Not genius, and not serving the Emperor. Or his shriveled sack, come to that. Azrael, in his first battle as Grandmaster, needed the Elder to bail him out, despite having literally put the entire chapter in the field. Losing to the Night Lords, of all people, because he didn't foresee them using portals. The same portal that he managed to get his hoodie out of his eyes long enough to see them use a few days beforehand. Tactical genius my arse. To be fair, I've never tried asking my arse for tactics, but it couldn't do any worse. Their secrets constantly let them down. They hide secrets of the Fallen, who are Dark Angels that attacked their own legion 10,000 years ago, from their own Marines, until they get enough trust that they're let into the inner circle, essentially the command structure and the first company. The problem with that? The gloomy cherubs judge worth not by how good they are at killing the Emperor's enemies, but by whether they'd be bloodthirsty enough at keeping their secrets. So they don't promote the best tacticians, just the best liars. The perfect people to spread the lie about their tactical genius. This leads to situations such as the literal chapter master of the Dark Angels, Lord of the Unforgiven, and all-round idiot, deciding to nearly single-handedly attack a fortress of Dark Mechanicum heretics and Night Lord Chaos Marines, just so that the regular Marines don't see the Fallen. The book literally mentions that Nabarius, the previous chapter master, died because he was, and I quote, hobbled by the suspicion that the Fallen were involved. It ends predictably. His own side killed him. Such is the price of idiocy. Tactical genius. And that secretive nature means that when, using the stop clock principle, these liars accidentally fall over and faceplant into a good idea, they can come undone by the secrets anyway. Because even being in the inner circle doesn't get you all the information. Remember Nestor, that Marine that would sacrifice a planet? Well, that came about because a brother chaplain took off chasing Fallen members, bringing all 5 other Marines stationed on the planet with him. After a series of traps that he walks into, showing his tactical genius, it becomes obvious that the Fallen had lured him away from the planet. What he didn't know was that the Dark Angel gene seed was hidden at his base. Only the apothecary knew that. And that a virus capable of wiping out the planet was also kept there. Only the Tech Marine knew that. If he had all that information, he could have worked out what the Fallen were doing and saved the lives of the Marines. But no. Dark Angel's got a secret. If it wasn't for him, the whole planet would have died too. He turned traitor to his chapter to save it. Let that sink in. In order to save an Imperial planet his chapter had pledged to protect, he has to become a traitor to the Dark Angels. Even within the inner circle, you learn more of the supposed truth at each step. The inner circle is just the start, just as in ancient mystery cults of old, or, in more modern times, bizarre groups such as Scientology, the Masons, or that awful weird cult Chloe from Smallville was in. Just without the adult stuff. Probably. To be honest, I don't know about that last bit, but I don't want to know what sort of thing Asmodai is into. I doubt he has a safe word. Okay, asked the definitely not heretical voices in my head. So if they're not loyal, they're not good at tactics, and will kill entire planets because of secrets, they must be good at hunting the Fallen. Well, no. The summer dress wearer's greatest ever interrogator managed to get 10 Fallen to confess their sins. 10. Well done. A tactical squad of Marines. They wouldn't even manage to put a football team together out of the Fallen he got to confess. Master hunters and torturers they are not. Hell, they're so bad at this that the leader of the Fallen, Cypher, has been caught 7 times. Each time he just has a chat with the Grandmaster Robewrinkler, and rather than getting him to confess, they just let him go. Presumably he's just there to wash his nightie. Okay, the voices only I seem to hear ask, but that's just confessing. They must be good at keeping things locked up until they confess. Their home is a giant spaceship called the Rock, a huge monastery, and part of their own blown-up homeworld that they turned into a spaceship, which, admittedly, sounds awesome. You'd think, then, that a giant monastery with deep dungeons that floats in the void would be great at hiding things away so they can't escape. You'd think wrong. Their arch-nemesis, the man who caused the Fallen and who is at least partly responsible for their awful taste in nightwear, was Luther. They had him locked up. He got out. They let the changeling of Tzeentch onto the Rock, without noticing, and then let it trick them into attacking the Space Wolves, not that they needed much encouragement, and then let it bugger off again. Cypher, basically, seems to have an all-access pass to their laundry room. So no, not great at locking things up. How about loyalty to the Emperor? Asked the voices that seem to also be offering me things in return for my soul. So probably Mark Zuckerberg. Sure, the light-phobic onesie-wearers may not care about the Imperium, but the Imperium is a mess anyway. They must be faithful to the Emperor's vision. That vision of humanity's primacy and a 10,000-year-old Imperium-wide policy of killing the warp creatures and the aliens. Sorry, demons and Xenos, you mean. Let me introduce you to the Watchers in the Dark. Absurdly cute little cloaks hiding, well, we don't know, and I feel you'd be put on a list if you asked. We do know that they are massively powerful psychers and probably warp entities. They seem to protect the Dark Angels commanders, wander around the Rock at will, and influence the Dark Angels as they see fit. Oh, and it is their test that the Chapter Masters have to pass to be Grand Pillowcase-wearing Chapter Master. It's hinted that if they don't like the leader they're testing, then that's the would-be Chapter Master's last time donning the tablecloth. Let's not forget about the heretical deal that the shade-obsessed caftan-wearing Marines struck with a Tau for the Tau to destroy some Marines from a successor chapter, after a psychic plague. Why do the deal when they could have killed everyone themselves really easily? Because they didn't want suspicion on them. That's right. They did deals with Xenos in order to hide things from the Imperium. Personally, if I were trying to be unnoticed, I would suggest not hiding under the worst ghost costumes in the world, but I'm no expert. Or when Azrael risked the lives of himself and his men by doing a deal with the Eldar to save his skin after he botched a battle with the Night Lords and would have, essentially, wiped the Dark Angels chapter from the galaxy. He even rushed back, after doing the Eldar's bidding, so that he could stop the Archangels of Dullness from killing the Eldar, because he needed his chapter at full strength to hunt the Fallen. Hardly cleansing the Xenos, is it? Or let's ask Interrogator Chaplain Boreas, the man who saved that planet from the Dark Angels. Interrogator Chaplain Boreas, what matters more, the Dark Angels' secrets or serving the Emperor?
This is the true purpose of the Dark Angels. This is the real mission of the chapter. Whilst the Fallen still lives unrepentant of his sins, we can gain no true honour. We cannot truly serve the Emperor as his greatest warriors. All else we do is ultimately in vain, but the hunt, the quest, these are what give us meaning.
Yes, I'm getting that. So not the Emperor's vision for humanity then. But surely these bloody voices that only seem to shut up when I drink copious amount of Jack Daniels cry, they must be good at flying under the radar. What, Asmodai blowing up cities, decimating chapters and pissing off Inquisitors not enough for you? How about their chief kimono model, Azrael? He basically has 2 jobs. 1, apologising for Asmodai. 2, not pissing off the Inquisition. You'd think, for a tactical genius, he'd get rid of Asmodai to help them fly under the radar. But no. The closest was when he booted Asmodai to be in charge of the scout detachment, where he promptly ordered the execution of a bunch of neophytes for being a little slow in answering his questions. Ironic, given his Primarch's ability to take his time, whether getting to terror or waking up. As for Azrael not pissing off the Inquisition, well, when working alongside the Grey Knights, you know, those designed for fighting chaos, the Master, Donner of the Cloth, spent the whole time trying to antagonise Kaldor Drago, the biggest Mary Sue and Chief Taint Smiter of the Grey Knights. It worked. they came to blows. Yeah, flying under the radar, not their strong suit either. Well, asked the voice that certainly aren't in any way coming from a malicious warp entity, what about avoiding corruption? Surely, with their background, they'll be hyper-vigilant. Meet Ezekiel, Chief Librarian of the Dark Angels, and the guy who gets to decide if someone is willing to screw over their own team enough to be let into the inner circle. He was found on a Chaos-controlled world as an Omega-level Psychic Kid, who essentially said, "Ah, Mr. Bond, I've been expecting you." Technically, he was chained up, but with his powers, he admits he could have gotten out of those chains any time he wanted, but he knew he was going to be found by the Dark Angels, and wanted to appear as a vulnerable prisoner for them to rescue. When he gets tested for purity, the guy testing him takes one look into his mind, instantly does his best impression of the Emperor, which is to say he goes into a panic-induced vegetable state, and, when he recovers, says simply that there's no more testing to be done, just give him the spare towels now. Not at all suspicious. In the Azrael book, Ezekiel literally spells out to Azrael that he could puppet him any time he wants to, and then goes on to puppet him into running away from a demon prince. Yeah, that's a trustworthy chap with no hint of chaos right there. Oh, and if a Dark Angel's brother doesn't fit the type of person that the head of the X-Men, librarians, wants, essentially you're not enough of a traitor to the Imperium, willing to sell them out to defeat a single member of the Fallen, then he'll mind-wipe you at best, or just melt your brains at worst. On the plus side, the Dark Angels certainly have enough cloths to wipe up all those melted brains. Maybe that's why they wear them. I think by now you get the idea. The Dark Angels are a bunch of wannabe medieval knights who are traitors to the Imperium, humanity, and the Emperor. Their tactical genius is a myth, they suck at missions they set themselves, and the only thing they seem actually good at is keeping secrets from each other, which often gets them killed. Honestly, at this point, I'm beginning to suspect that the Fallen were the true loyal Dark Angels. The Dark Angels do claim to be the first and greatest, but, as any man knows, finishing first is a great way to get your partners mad at you.
The White Scars.
Hello, and welcome back to me pointing out how stupid every faction in 40k is. Last video was the Dark Angels, and in order of chapter number now, it is the turn of the Speed Freaks. No, not the Orcs. They're far more sensible than these guys. The White Scars. During their video, I took the piss by pointing out how, despite how often the Dark Angels claim to be tactical geniuses, they really weren't. But I am beginning to think I was wrong, and that they should have been graded on a curve. Compared to the White Scars, the Gloomy Cherubs are genuinely smart. But then, compared to the White Scars, my desk fan is a genius, and it doesn't even work. I didn't want it to be this way. The White Scars aesthetic is unbelievably cool. Genghis Khan Mongolian mounted troops inspired Space Marines, sign me up. And their white and red armour goes surprisingly hard. But, whereas Genghis Khan took over much of the known world, the White Scars would be lucky to take over a table at an empty restaurant. Honestly, one of the original Khan's millions of descendants should be suing Games Workshop for slander. Note that this video contains spoilers of the White Scars Omnibus, Masters of the Hunt. Also, hit that subscribe button. It really would help this channel insult more of the things that people love. And if that's not the greatest cause of all time, then I don't know what is. Before I get too nasty, I need to think of something else that's nice to say about the White Scars. At least they don't abandon planets like the Dark Angels do? Oh, wait, nope, they did. I've got nothing. Well, nothing other than the over 4,000 words of notes from their omnibus detailing just how bloody stupid they are. 4,000 words that I somehow have to turn into a semi-coherent script. Their aesthetic really is cool though. Remember, this series focuses on them in the 40k setting. The 30k Legions, and their Primarchs, are a future series. If there's one guy who should rank up there for the stupidest Marine of all time, it is their Master of the Hunt, Captain of the Third Company, and all-round window licker, Captain Corsaro. What level of stupid are we dealing with here? The kind who names their motorbike Moondraken. So roughly a 14-year-old boy level of stupid. And if you've ever had the misfortune to meet a 14-year-old boy, you know they are the specialist level of stupid that exists. The Captain of the Third is always the Master of the Hunt, so I should probably explain what a Master of the Hunt is. They are, essentially, an internet repairman. You call for help, You find out you have to book them centuries in advance, and even then they turn up far, far too late to be of any use to even your grandkids. Their job is to hunt the enemies of the White Scars. The master of the hunt, that is, not the internet technician, though the technician would probably do a better job. They have a big old list of enemies, and choose the one to go after next at a secret check-in of the to-do list, such as the Alpha Legion Demon Prince Voldorius. His crime? Killing over 1 trillion Imperial citizens. Sounds like the sort of thing that should be hunted down. No problem there. The problem is that the list of the chapter's enemies is like a McFlurry machine. You'll be waiting a very long time to get the brief window that they do anything about it. So it took the White Scars 2,000 years to decide to start hunting him down. 2,000 years after this chap wipes out 125 times the current population of Earth, does anyone think, yeah, let's kill him next? Oh, and it takes over a decade to track him down. That's 10 years of an entire company wandering around the galaxy, asking if anyone had seen the huge blue-green spiky fellow with big wings. If only there was a group of people within the Imperium, an Ordos, if you like, whose job it is to hunt these chaps down and then call in the big guns when needed. Nah, let's waste 10% of one of the first founding chapters doing nothing but asking for directions for 10 years. Great use of resources there, chaps. Of course, finding and killing the target of the hunt isn't enough. No, it has to be done in melee only, by the master of the hunt, and then take his head. Or it doesn't count, or something. Shouldn't the target be killing the bad guy in the most efficient way possible? No wonder their to-do list is so long. But, in all honesty, it's hard to blame the White Scars there. I'd be sending Corsaro out on wild goose chases at every chance I had, if I were them, because he's an idiot. To be fair, the White Scars recognise this, and, upon hearing Huron Blackheart, he of having nearly an old Legion-strength warband of Chaos Marines at his beck and call, was going to attack their homeworld, they immediately sent Corsaro off to fight the Tau. One of the only sensible calls they've made as far as I can see. I wouldn't want him as part of my defence either. You see, Corsaro is not just a blithering idiot. He also hasn't yet found a trap he hasn't walked straight into. A demon pretending to be a demon prince just to get him come running so they could collapse the ground into the mouth of a waiting monster? Check. Actually, not just check, but leaving his 100 White Scars to overrun 300 Alpha Marines, thousands of cultists, and a fucking Baneblade. The enemy pretending to be weak to make him charge and then unleash hell from hidden forces? Check. Twice. In the same week. Get your landing zone surrounded before you even get there? Done and done. How this chap is alive is a bloody mystery. Well, no, it's not a mystery. He's still alive because the Raven Guard are babysitting him. Twice they had to pull Corsaro's sorry ass from the fire. Score 2 for the sensible Marines. But it's hard to blame Corsaro too much. The entire chapter can basically be described as speed junkies who don't know what the hell they're doing. Now, don't get me wrong, motorbikes are a cool idea. Machines that make you get where you need to be faster. The downside of motorbikes, that you're open to the elements, is rather mitigated by Space Marines being essentially tanks themselves. You know what isn't a good idea? Using them to charge into thousands of enemies who are willing to throw themselves under your wheels just to slow you down. Guess what plan the White Scars had against frothing at the mouth Chaos Cultists and the hive mind of the Tyranids with their millions of bugs? Yeah, they slowed to a crawl and used melee. Mongolian cavalry worked so well because, amongst other things, they were excellent shots from their horses, and they would wheel away before melee, whittling down their enemy with bowfire. They did have standard cavalry, but their horseback archers were massive difference makers. The White Scars, on the other hand, charged into melee on them, not only instantly halting their gotta-go-fast mindset, but also painting a giant target on their back. When fighting from a slowly moving motorbike, you're not weaving, you're not dodging, you're just sitting there swinging your chainsword, asking anything with a gun to take 3 shots at you. I'm sure that can never go oh, it did. You're also very much stuck to the planet, so charging an enemy that can fly up and leave you stuck with your thumb up your ass would be a stupid idea. Guess what the White Scars' plan against the Tau crisis suits was? Go on, you'll never guess. Yeah, alright, you guessed right. Thankfully, the Raven Guard were on hand to stop them getting wiped out. Not before they lost 40% of their marines, though. Twice they managed to get their arse handed to them using this tactic. So of course they wanted to go for the hat-trick. Thankfully, the grown-ups in the room, a Catachan commander, a Knight Precept, and a Raven Guard captain, managed to bully them into not getting wiped out by dying to the same way they did twice already. Good job, Master of Being Hunted. This from a chap that is so deluded, he genuinely tells himself that the White Scars would never rely on just one tactic. To be fair, they have two. Plan A, go fast and hit things. Plan B, see Plan A. Now, remember the Thunder Warriors? The original Proto-Marines that the Emperor killed off as, amongst other issues, they couldn't take orders and tended to fight even amongst themselves. Well, the White Scars are champs again then. Not only does Cassaro ignore orders, such as the barely worth mentioning matter of refusing the order to go back to the White Scars' homeworld to save them from a Legion-strength Chaos Warband, but other entire companies are useless too. 1 month of being on a spaceship, and the entire fourth company is at each other's throats, feuding over old tribe loyalties and other grievances. 1 month is all it takes for a chapter that spends decades wandering through space trying to find where they're meant to be hunting. But let's lay off Cassaro for a moment. Meet Jug Hatton, commander of the equally stupid, the fourth company, the ones we just mentioned. Tasked with defending a world from a tendril of a shattered Hive Fleet, he immediately sends people out on bikes to round up the human nomads. He does this for the sake of speed. The sake of speed when he has literally got air support that he could send that would take a fraction of the time. But the biker gangs of idiocy have to ride. He understands how the NIDs work. He gets that there is a gene-stealer presence on the planet and that it will have infected the locals. So, Plan A is locking all humans together in a giant cave, peppered with loads of tunnels, whilst the White Scars and PDF deal with the NIDs. Can you guess what happens to the humans? If you can, you're immediately smarter than old Joggy Hat here. After fluking his way into killing the NID Synapse creatures, he's then confused why they aren't all mindless. Even though he knows there's gene stealers, he knows there'll be a matriarch, and he knows they're a Synapse creature. This level of stupidity genuinely must take practice. After the gene stealers have eaten literally all the humans, and the NIDs are about to win, the Eldar turn up to save the day, do some time travel shenanigans, and hand the White Scars the dubs. Repeating myself from the Dark Angels video, but why the hell aren't Space Marines worshipping Eldar at this point? They seem to save them far more than the Emperor ever has. At the start of the book, the entire company is bemoaning having to defend a world when they should be hunting for their Primarch. So, spending years in a spaceship rather than months, and getting as far as they have in 10,000 years, which is to say nowhere then. And when they are suddenly in the webway, because of Eldar shenanigans, do they do their duty and hunt where they last saw the Primarch go? Or do they do what the Eldar say, because the Eldar are the true masters of the Space Marines? It's the Eldar option. It's always the Eldar option. Joggy Noggin suffers the same affliction that Cassaro and most other White Scars have, speed junkyism. Not only did he decide to ride 50 Space Marines, so half his force, at thousands of NIDs, when it was suggested by one of the few sensible Marines the chapter has that maybe Jogged in the Brain was getting too far ahead of his force, and that it would be better to let the others catch up, his reply was, "Do you think I will?" whilst grinning like an idiot and revving his engine. Again, I state, these Marines are as smart as teenage boys. And not just any teenage boys, but the ones at the back of the class sniffing glue. They even stand around revving their bikes' engines because they like the sound. Like a teenager with baby's first chicken chaser. And they're all like it. Glory hunting speed freaks. Korosai is a land speeder flying marine who says he's going in at it for a big hunt that could snap him in two. Two other marines suggest a sensible course, to which Korosai says, balls to sensible, I want more skulls, and flies in immediately, to his death. And the skulls, oh by the Emperor's granddad balls, the skulls. It's not just the Master of the Hunt that needs to take skulls and hang them back home. They literally all do it. Corsaro's company collected an entire Land Raider's worth of Chaos Cultist heads to hang up back home. That's over 1,000 Chaos Skulls in their home from only one battle. Nurgle would have a field day with this, But I'm pretty sure that any of the Chaos Gods could be able to use this to turn the White Scars to their side in a matter of weeks. I'm serious. Corsara's stomach even growled appreciatively, their words, at the smell of thousands of rotting heads. Tell me that's not already halfway fallen. They even have demon heads. You know, demons that famously don't die but go back to the warp upon receiving a mortal wound. The stupidity of these guys is so great they're able to defy the established laws of the universe. Of course, their stupidity extends to their so-called encoded battle cant. The orders they give in what is meant to be an indecipherable way so the enemy don't know what they're doing. Except it's bloody easy. The north wind turns, meaning get yourselves out of there. The wind turns at midnight, meaning we'll get out of there now. With superhuman control of their vocal cords, there should be normal random chatter that inflection gives the real orders, not words. And yet they consider it indecipherable. Let me read you an excerpt. He spoke the words in the White Scars battle cant, which the Alpha Legion would have no knowledge of should they intercept the transmission. The same Alpha Legion he acknowledged being clever and duplicitous, and who he has fought pretty much constantly for a decade. Yeah, if I can work it out, then the enemy who has spent 10,000 years embedded in the Imperium without being shaken loose, and who are renowned experts at this, will have no problems. The Times crossword is about 1,000,000 times harder than this join the dots shit. But apparently, these great minds don't see that. I could go on and on. From the Stormseer who thinks his commander is useless at motivating troops, to the Eldar having to teach the White Scars that dropping a cave roof on Genestealer heads does in fact kill them. From the constant idiocy of refusing to wear helmets, to them being surprised and furious that guard tanks weren't there in support after they intentionally raced ahead like lunatics. But by now, I think you get the point. If Huron doesn't take Trigoris in the first few days of getting there, then he doesn't deserve to be a named character. Who am I kidding? Either the Raven Guard or the Eldar will show up to act as the White Scars' plot armour again.
The Space Wolves.
The Space Wolves, a chapter of Space Marines so brand-aligned they may as well have been invented by a PR company. Space Wolves, Wolf Guard, Thunder Wolves, Great Wolf, Wolf and Wolf, Wolf, Wolf. Their brand alignment is unmatched by anyone but the Iron Hands. But brand alignment does not a sensible chapter make. So let's dig into these Space Wolves and explain just why they are the biggest waste of gene seed in the entire Imperium. Now, let's insult the hell, with one L, out of these so-called Space Wolves. Let's be clear, Viking Space Marines, a damn cool idea. Yes, history nerds, I know Vikinger was a verb, not a noun. I've watched Dr. Jackson Crawford too, but we're going with a common definition for this. Keep your nerd credentials in your pants. But, as Pancreas No Work correctly points out, these are no Vikings. Hell, they're not even wolves. We all know that there are no wolves on Fenris. Wait, no wolves on Fenris? I've worked it out. The books have hinted at it, but I've got the missing puzzle piece. I won't go into it here. The Imperial Fist video will have to wait a bit longer. For the next one, we'll be exposing the greatest conspiracy in all of 40k. Bar none. I promise you've not heard this before, so you better get subscribed to catch that one. But for now, we're insulting the greatest waste of gene seed in the Imperium. Now, I admit that is a bold claim. The Space Wolves, the Emperor's Executioners, one of the first founding chapters and the sons of the Primarch Leman Russ are, somehow, the greatest waste of gene seed in the Imperium. Surely not. But it's true. Let me elaborate. Whilst the Space Wolves are unlike other Space Marine chapters in many, many stupid ways, they still, fundamentally, rely on gene seed to be able to make more Space Wolves. Gene seed is, essentially, the lifeblood of the chapter. Without it, there is no more chapter. Even more so for the Wolves because of complex Canis Helix reasons, we'll go into that later, meaning that they don't have successor chapters with the same gene seed that they can borrow from. Well, until Belisarius Cawl waved his magic gene wand, try get that image out of your head. Now, Space Marines get as much action with the opposite gender as your average Space Wolf player does, which is to say, none. not least because of the smell, from both the Marines and the players, which puts potential mates off, making gene seed all important to Space Marines. The gene seed is derived from 2 progeny glands that all Space Marines are implanted with. These are the only 2 that any Marine will ever get, and the only way of reproducing Marines. The first can be harvested after 5 years, the second after 10, but is often done at death. This, by the way, is bloody stupid, so remind me to make a video of how stupid it is another time. Given all that, you may think that the Space Wolves would be super careful about making sure their Marines were safe until they get those glands removed. If you do think that, you're giving the Space Wolves far, far too much credit. Remember, your average Spaniel is about 10 times smarter than these guys. Most chapters have young Marines who haven't fully completed the upgrade process act as scouts, keeping them away from the main fighting and using them to, well, scout. They also heavily train these would-be Marines. Once they're full Marines, they're still held back as devastators, using heavy weapons to keep them from being directly on the front lines, so they can learn the ropes, because most Marines like not to have their chapter wiped out. The Space Wolves, though, they do none of this. They're chucked straight into Bloodclaws packs before they're even fully augmented. Do Bloodclaws packs hang back, keeping those progeny glands safe? Do they balls? They're given a chainsword and a bolt pistol and told to go nuts chopping at anything that moves. World Eaters? Chop. Death Guard? Chop. Striking Scorpions? Chop, chop, chop. Why care about the long-term survival of the chapter when you can have the untrained prove their worth by fist-fighting a hellbrute? As for training, hell no. Why bother? In the Blood of Assaheim book, we learn that rather than train neophytes with droids and machines, they just send them out to, and I quote, learn the skills in real combat, or they die. Quick reminder, these progeny glands are harvested at 5 and 10 years. They used 1 to make this Marine. If they die before 5 years, they can't be replaced, and if before 10, they can't get a second to replace any that died without being harvested. They're saying they choose to waste gene seed, send them out untrained, in squads composed only of the untrained, against deadly foes, and hope that they get good. And if they're saying they choose to waste gene seed, who am I to second guess them? They're a waste of gene seed. But wait, that waste of gene seed gets worse. Remember that Canis Helix I mentioned? Well, it's a curse on the Space Wolves that means that they mutate into what a normal person would describe as a werewolf when they receive the first part of the gene seed, from drinking from the cup of Wolfen, because what else would the PR-aligned Marines call it? Well, those that don't die taking it anyway, which is a lot of them. They then take these gene-seeded monsters a huge distance away from their home, known as the Fang, because of course it is, and drop them off. The monsters have to get back without going fully bestial. Those few that do are then given the rest of the gene seed that stabilises them, which means that they could stabilise these beasts immediately after they drink from the cup, if they so wished, but choose to let a bunch of would-be Marines, who have had the first of the gene seed steps, turn into mindless beasts. Honestly, I can't help but think they're just sitting in the Fang, dreaming up ways that they can waste gene seed at this point. Well, that and other things that they can give wolfy names to anyway. Of course, this waste of gene seed is not the only reason that they're utterly bloody stupid. Spoilers for the Assaheim trilogy of books incoming. A trilogy that I went into with low expectations, but ended up being really good. I'd recommend them. But you're not here to watch me glaze a book. You're here for me to insult the Space Wolves. The Space Wolf codexes claim that for a Space Wolf, there is nothing better than fighting battle after battle. They hunger for it. They yearn for it. It's in their blood. And yet, the codex is talking out of its arse. Well, it would be talking out of its arse if it had one, but saying it's talking out of its spine just sounds stupid. Meet Jorunda, a very grumpy old grey hunter who loves nothing more than tinkering with his Thunderhawk and complaining. A lot of complaining. When being told it's time to go to war, he says, and again I am quoting,
Everyone is tired, Blade Master. If they keep sending us out year after year, With no chance to breathe or retrain, or remember what we are doing, we will be more than tired. We'll be dead.
Ah, the poor little puppy. Instead of sitting around the fang, drinking and feasting, in the grim darkness of the far future, where I'm reliably informed there is only war, he has to go to war year after year. Does nobody think of the Space Marines and what they have to go through? Funny he mentions training. Firstly, for how they don't train their blood claws, and secondly, for how this is the same pack that sent Halfoy, one of the pack members, on a zero-G mission of importance. How much training in zero-G has he had? The same amount as I have. They could have sent someone with training, but why bother? Remember, the chapter ethos:
learn the skills in real combat, or they die.
Now, the Space Wolves and Dark Angels hate each other, which is ironic, given how both are exceedingly focused on keeping secrets, in a manner that will get their own side killed. At least the Dark Angels try to make excuses for it. The Space Wolves, they don't even bother. Halfoy, on that zero-G mission, hadn't even been briefed on what the space station that they were going to was like. He didn't know entry routes, exit routes, how many rooms there were, potential enemies, targets, whether there was a kettle available to make some tea. Nothing. They just sent him in blind. And worst of all, they sent him in tealess. The main arc of the Assaheim trilogy focuses on a secret that the least Space Wolfy Space Wolf, Ingvar, uncovers that seems to threaten high-ranking Space Wolves. He tells his Varangai, the Wolf Guard pack leader Gunlauger, when Space Wolf High Command, in the shape of Najal Stormcaller, turns up. Do they mention it to him? Or do they keep it a secret? When Balder, another of the pack, is getting massive headaches and feeling sick, whilst battling the forces of Nurgle, does he tell anyone, or keep it secret? They keep secrets. They keep so many secrets that even a Dark Angel would start to feel that maybe this is a bit too much. Hell, later Najal asks why he didn't tell anyone, and Balder basically says,
why would I tell anyone I was getting sick while fighting Nurgle?
And Najal essentially shrugs his shoulder and says,
fair point.
I don't even need to point out why this is some of the most stupid shit in the entire 40k universe. They know what Nurgle is. They know what Nurgle does. Yet they all agree that a Marine shouldn't report symptoms of sickness whilst fighting Nurgle. How are they not all chaos worshipping now? Actually, I'm pretty sure they are. So expect that video shortly too. When millions of Nurgle followers are outside of the city, where are the wolves? Well, 2 of them are injured because Gunlauger's pride, including one who is probably a minion of Nurgle at this point. And instead of being helpful, Gunlauger and Ingvar are fighting each other. After he eventually stops fighting long enough to look up, Gunlauger is asked to approximate enemy numbers. His reply,
thousands. Many, many thousands.
Presumably, he struggles to envisage a number higher than 1,000. Halfoy is injured and finally told to go swap with Ingvar. You know, a non-injured Marine who isn't fighting at the moment. Halfoy starts to do what he's told, but then thinks,
so close. I almost did what they told me. By the blood of Russ, what am I turning into?
I know I said this in the White Scars video, but how is it that these guys are more obedient than the Thunder Warriors? They can't spend more than 5 minutes in each other's company without someone wanting to kill someone else, and haven't yet found an order that they didn't immediately countermand. When dealing with a Cardinal that was admittedly high on his own supply, Gunlauger found out that the Canoness, who had been an ally, was now strapped to a penance engine. Rather than listen to the Rune Lord, Najal Stormcaller, the alphiest of Alpha Wolves, and keep his mouth shut, Gunlauger immediately draws and activates his Thunderhammer, risking Najal's entire plan. Najal had to freeze him in place with his psychic powers to stop him from killing the Cardinal, who was central to everything. Thunder Warriors obeyed orders better, and they had better tactics. For them to have a Space Wolf with any fucking sense at all, they had to arrange for him to spend over half a century learning from more sensible chapters in the Death Watch. And even then, he was sensible only by comparison. And they won't listen to him anyway. Gunlauger needed his pack to get onto a planet that was being destroyed by Nurgle, mid-battle, with Ecclesiarchy also after them. So the plan was for 2 Marines to take on thousands of cultists and an Alpha Legion Demon Prince, 2 Marines to take on thousands of cultists and multiple squads of well-trained Ecclesiarchy troops and capture a prisoner alive. Then all 4 to get back to their lander with a prisoner in tow and get that back to their ship. Their lander needed to fight through chaos, air and space superiority. Their ship in orbit was a rubbish old one that they'd managed to steal, but the Space Marine at the helm had to, somehow, survive against overwhelming odds whilst waiting for them. Oh, and the young Bloodclaw decided to pop over to the Ecclesiarchy ship to take them all on by his bloody self. All this whilst one of their number suffered through what was either a rise in psychic power that was going to kill him, or a Nurgle infection. The level of plot armour required to survive this is insane, as was the plan. The ends do not justify the means when the means are this fucking insane. They genuinely delayed the mission to save Ragnar Blackmane, their Wolf Lord, because, in part at least, and this is a direct quote, Jorunda was in a dangerous mood following the destruction of his beloved gunship. Giving him the chance to work off some of that fury had its benefits. So he needed to be allowed to punch things before going to save the most important person in their company. Are they Marines or inmates at a mental health retreat? Hulk has more self-control than these idiots. Hell, when Jorunda dies, Gunlauger went on a rampage so extreme he didn't notice a fucking Reaver Titan turning up. So not only no self-control, but these master hunters managed to miss an entire bloody Titan. And the pack system is also bloody stupid. Bloodclaws, these new Marines, join together in a pack, and that pack continues through their progression as Bloodclaws get to Grey Hunters and then to Longfangs. Do they add to it as Marines die off? Nope. So the pack gets less and less effective as their Marines get more and more experienced, simply due to attrition. Eventually, they're left with a lone wolf, who will then decide to go be a scout. Think on that a moment. The more skilled a Marine gets, the less effective they become, simply because their squad is dying off. Those skills become more and more wasted, rather than being passed on to the rest of the chapter. The pack in the Esserheim trilogy are treated as a mongrel pack, simply because they didn't follow the usual method and had reinforcements, something that the Space Wolves would, under normal circumstances, never consider. There's loads more I could go into, because the Space Wolves are stupid.
The Imperial Fists.
Picture an Imperial Fist, and what do you see? No, not a big block of cheese. Cheddar has no place in this video. If you put your mouldy cow juice obsession aside for a moment, it's probably a
Stoic defender of humanity, the Praetorians of terror, all but godlike ability in erecting and defending fortifications, emotionless space marines who can withstand any trauma and get the job done.
If so, you've been sucked in by their PR. They're not any of those things. Well, aside from being Praetorians. But that's because the Roman Praetorian Guard were just as likely to kill the Emperor that they were paid to protect as they were defend him. Hardly a ringing endorsement. Quick warning, if you want to read the excellent Maladrax or pretty good Conquest Apocalypse, I will have spoilers here, though I'll keep the big secret from Apocalypse out of it. I also, technically, have spoilers for Conquest Fists of Terror, but it's hard to spoil something that is so rotten it may as well be worshipping Nurgle. If you like the Fists and want to keep it that way, don't read that book. And this series is based on 40k. 30k, War of the Beast, etc. shall be future videos. Now, on with the insulting. We start by hitting them where it hurts. They're utterly useless attempts at defending anything. Honestly, they couldn't fortify Serial. Gaia was a world that the Fists had pledged to protect millennia ago, which was Gaia's first stupid mistake. Its second was that it had a constant Imperial Fist presence, though admittedly only a few Marines at any given time. You'd think, after millennia of Imperial Fists being on the planet, that it would be a well-defended fortress world. You'd think wrong. Even before any problems, Gaia's workers frequently died to plants. No, not plant machinery, just plants. Something us humans of the third millennium have gotten depressingly good at killing off, but is seemingly beyond the Sons of Dawn. That's before the brown stuff hits the spinny stuff, though. Meet the idiot, Sergeant Torgan, whose hatred for humanity is only matched by his unbelievable incompetence. This man is on Gaia to protect it. So has he fortified the hives? Has he protected vital infrastructure? Has he made it so he and his squad are essentially bulwarks against any rebellion or invading force? Or has he spent his entire existence daydreaming about ending humanity and doing absolutely bloody nothing? If you've been paying attention, you'll know it's option 2. He moans that miners have a cushy life, protected by the Imperial Fists. He moans that the Lords are outraged by the Mechanicus' suggestion that workers get turned into servitors. He complains that they worry about small things such as increased mutations, huge drops in mining output, and the astronomical faltering. You know, tiny, minuscule things really. This stoic defender basically just moans. He certainly moaned when the workers rose up and attacked the hive. In pain, anyway. When they took out a few of his men, helped by the fact that the workers had minor pickaxes, whereas the Marines seemed to forget to bring melee weapons. Presumably, they were just planning on fisting them. Damn it! I promised myself I wouldn't make a fisting joke. He certainly moaned, internally, when the psyker in the group puppeteered him into killing the rest of his squad. A psyker he recognised as a psyker, but didn't bother doing anything about. He didn't moan after that, mostly because he was dead. Not sure who would claim his soul after, though. Even Slanesh wouldn't want that level of moaning from a fist. Okay, no more fist jokes. I must resist. But that's just one idiot. The Imperial Fist then sent a company to find out what happened to their Marines. Surely these can't be so useless. Oh, they can. I'll do you a favour and skip over our introduction to them, which involves some of the most painful dialogue I have ever had the misfortune of reading. Did I mention don't read this book? I feel it should be stressed, which is a pity, as another Mike Brooks book I read, Shroud of Night, was excellent. Instead, I'll skip right to their landing. They land. The captain walks off the ship. The captain's head explodes from a sniper. A good start. Of the 2 Imperial Fists in charge of defending this world, both have died on their first engagement. It doesn't get any better. The Imperial Fists, or the book for that matter. The librarian eventually catches the sniper. Does he question her to get some leads? No. He channels his fists of fury, rips off her head, then immediately complains that they don't know what's going on. These geniuses look at 3 armed miners, worm logos, and a being called Father, and mutants that look exceedingly similar to gene stealers, and decide it must be chaos. I know. We, as connoisseurs of the grim dark, know far more than the characters in 40k do. But a block of Edam cheese knows more than these Imperial Fists seem to. In the Maladrax book, Lysander claims the Fists are taught about killing all kinds of Xenos, so as to be better killers of them. Unfortunately, Fist of the Imperium is calling Lysander a liar. Which, to be fair, he is. But we'll get to that. Do they, at least, manage to fortify the hive? Hell no! Insurgent armies leap through air ducts, blow holes in the walls, and generally just saunter in, to their heart's content. The Fists on Gaia would have been wiped out almost as quick as their captain was, if not for the Death Watch turning up. Which is a nice change of pace from the Eldar. Though the Fists and the Death Watch do manage to conspire to lose the only loyal hive on the entire planet, to a bunch of worm-worshipping cultists armed with weapons that couldn't pierce concrete, never mind power armour. This is not unusual. Meet Imperial Fist Lieutenant Calder, a Primaris Lieutenant, because who isn't these days, in charge of Imperial Fists, Raven Guard and White Scars in the defence of an ecclesiastical world the Word-Bearers are attacking. He notes that the governor of the world is hiding something important, but doesn't bother finding out what that is until the Word-Bearers are attacking. Instead, he sets about building defences, whilst the White Scars go and do something useful. It's the defence of a world. Surely defences are useful. When they're more than just a few ferrocrete bulwarks and razor wire, sure. But as the White Scars and Raven Guard bought the Lieutenant days extra to fortify the planet, at the cost of their own lives, he spent it doing precisely diddly squat of use. He may as well have spent it manicuring those all-important fists for all the use he was. Just as the word-bearers attack, he finds out the secret that the governor is hiding, and realises what few defences he did pull his thumb out of his arse, or fingers away from the manicurist, long enough to erect, are mostly pointless. But some were in the right place. So what tactical wizardry did the word-bearers have to use to overcome them? Was it a plan so carefully constructed only Zinch could have come up with it? Did they have to fight so hard Khorne would be proud? Or be so hard Slaanesh would be? No, they just flew one gunship straight into them. One. That's it. That's all it took. The only reason that the fists weren't wiped out to a man was because of the remaining White Scars turning up at just the right moment. The secret, I'm trying not to give it away, pulling the lieutenant's literal arse from the proverbial fire. And let's not forget sheer word-bearer incompetence and cowardice. Then there's Chaplain Storm, man in a spaceport, the first area that the fists fortified back on Gaia.
Cult infiltrators, substantial strength. Must have got in through a crawlway or pipe we didn't see.
The great fortifiers undone yet again, by things they could have found by simply putting a bit of effort in. Presumably they were all too busy at the manicurist. But these are relative no-mark characters, much as a lieutenant that had met both Dawn and Guilliman could be called a no-mark. How about the much-vaunted captain of the first, Lysander? Well, after fortifying a ship's engine against Iron Warrior's attack, that engine turned into a dance floor full of demons. Yes, that was a weird sentence to say. A dance floor that he quickly fell on with as much grace as me hitting the dance floor after 10 beers, along with the other members of the first company. That's Lysander hitting the dance floor with other members of the first company, not me. I'd need a lot more than 10 beers if I want to spend time with them. He then stands there as the Iron Warriors walk up, slap him unconscious, and haul him and his squad off. He was probably just confused by there not being a wall to hide behind. Sorry, I mean fortify. These are the Marines that meant to be the truest defenders of Terra. Mankind is doomed. The supposedly stoic space soldiers are emotional messes. We met Sergeant Money earlier, but, as with his lack of defences, he's far from the only one. If the Imperial Fist had it their way, they wouldn't have to defend humanity, because there would be no more humanity. Or, as the, we're told, uber-empathic librarian Lidoran says,
"We do not care about your politics. We do not care about you."
Or maybe the Chaplain Storm,
"We could have glassed your planet. We have not ruled it out."
Or my favourite, also by Chaplain Storm,
"Loideran, you alone, of all the Imperial Fists on this planet, retain a connection to our species, an empathy with them."
Basically, no other Imperial Fist gives two hoots about humanity. And we've already seen that Librarian Lidoran doesn't either. So, guess I'll just glass us? When First Captain Lysander says,
"It falls on us to remake the glorious Bastion Imperialis that was a Primarch's dream and duty. The flesh and bone of mankind will itself be the rampart."
he doesn't mean it metaphorically. Hell, the Codex literally tells us that they use the dead aspirants of the Phalanx, their massive ancient spaceship home, with the corpses crushed down into an impossibly small and dense size, made into ammunition for their macro cannons. We really shouldn't be surprised. Of course, that motion doesn't just limit itself to wanting to wipe out humans. They're just as capable of using their emotions to screw up in other ways, such as not being able to control the PDF that they refused to work with previously. What do they expect when their approach to commanding is essentially, "Shut up, bitches, I'm the pimp here"?
They are obeying our orders readily enough, though the High Marshal has made a point of dispatching regiments to fight in the local mines. This, despite our strong suggestion that he curtail such operations.
If only those pathetic humans saw sense and offered to work with the fists. Oh, they did. And you told them to stick it. Not that their own troops are any better. When ordered not to engage in the local mines, the company champion, Hester, literally starts daydreaming about being a captain, walks into the mine, discovers it's a trap and gets promptly blown up, killing a few 100,000 humans on trains above in the process. If you think that was unique, the librarian that ordered him not to go in there falls for literally the same trap a couple of chapters later. But what can you expect from a chapter where the first captain, and marked as future chapter master, is so worried about saving his squad mates that he does deals with demons to make that happen? Note, that is deals plural, not singular. And he hides all this from the chaplains when he is eventually saved, telling himself that his hatred and anger kept him immune from corruption. If only there was an angry god, one that corrupted via hatred and anger. He'd be the exception, though. The rest would have fallen to Slaanesh, if they haven't already. The Codex notes that all Imperial Fists have to constantly wrestle with their pride. I quote,
The Ultramarines recognise the passion all Imperial Fists keep under tight rein. The continued mortification is necessary, for pride has ever been the Imperial Fist's greatest weakness.
Interestingly, it's also noted that ritualised dueling is an important part of the Imperial Fists for settling grievances. Now, what other chapter was famous for excessive pride and ritualised dueling? Couldn't get the hint? Let's go further.
Such has ever been the Imperial Fist's way, to strike where the enemy is strongest and hammer humiliation upon their broken bodies.
If you're not getting Emperor's Children vibes, then I suggest you report to your nearest commissar for, education, and that ignored their obsessive use of the pain glove, a device designed to cause extreme pain and use as penance for even the smallest infraction, because of Dawn's belief that, again I'm quoting,
Pain burns away impurity and brings necessary clarity.
Yeah, not Slaaneshi at all. Or there's the third company. I'll quote again from the Codex.
With each battle won or lost, they edge closer to perfection. Though whether they will ever reach that hallowed state or die trying remains to be seen.
So a chapter that has excessive pride, obsesses over defence, seeks perfection, and uses pain for clarity, that claims stoicism while secretly being full of ambition, and who considers themselves far above humans, and who are basically rubbish at all of it. Welcome to the Imperial Fists, the defenders of terror, when they're not having their nails done. It's amazing that, unlike Cadia, terror still stands.
The Blood Angels.
The Blood Angels should not exist. None of the Blood Angels' successor chapters should exist. This is a simple fact. No, I'm not talking about being hunted down by the Inquisition, though they should, or fall into chaos. I'll cover that again. This isn't an opinion because I don't like them. My next video will actually be on why I think the Blood Angels should be the poster boys of 40k. No, I'm talking cold, hard facts and simple mathematics, not opinions. The Blood Angels should not exist. Their presence in the galaxy of the 41st millennium is an affront to logic, maths, and anyone with even half a brain, which, admittedly, rules most of you out. Now, in my other videos, I've insulted Dark Angels, White Scars, Space Wolves, and what became my own nemesis, the Imperial Fists, who, fittingly, broke me on their indestructible walls of awful writing. In doing so, I read a bunch of books and cherry-picked their stupidity. I even found lore to suggest that the Space Wolves don't actually exist. But this time, it's different. I did read a bunch of Blood Angels books, which were admittedly mostly excellent, such as Dante, Devastation of Baal, and Darkness in the Blood, as well as the codexes. Despite being good reads, there was plenty of stupid nonsense to pick from. But I don't need to, because when it comes down to it, the mere existence of the Blood Angels at all is stupid. Why do I say that? Let's do this old school, as a list. 5 reasons the Blood Angels should not exist, starting with the most minor, working our way up to the most brain-dead. Ready?
Number 5.
They should have been known by the Nids. Look, Devastation of Baal was a cool book, even if the Flesh Terrors and Knights of Blood stole the show. It gave tons of cool lore, some decent characters, and a spotlight on lesser-known chapters. A genuinely good book. But it should have ended with the only thing left of the Blood Angels being smears on Tyranid toilet paper. Tyranid toilet paper? GW are obviously too busy making their 40 billionth Primaris Lieutenant to make products that would actually sell. I mean, who wouldn't buy Tyranid toilet paper? Anyway, if your plan for how to fluke a win for their home team is timey-wimey warp nonsense, then that's not a plan. Hell, the White Scars already did that. There's only so many times we can accept warp-based time shenanigans as an answer. The Blood Angels had their arse handed to them. They weren't just beaten, They were lunch. But then somehow, A, the maledictum turns up, knocking the hive mind unconscious. A trick the warp has never been shown even slightly able to do before or since. B, 70 years passes in about an hour for the Sons of the Feathered Freak, and just about no one else, allowing old Big Clippy himself to turn up to save the day. And the only clue to that happening is one line about a chronometer on a Flesh Tearer's Thunderhawk. If your Deus Ex Machina is to rely on timey-wimey warp luck, then you don't have a plan. You have an entire bloodline destroyed.
Number 4.
Poor quality recruits. After the devastation of Baal, the Blood Angels were hurting. Their numbers are severely reduced, sort of. The Primarch, with the soul of an electronic paperclip, turns up with a legion's worth of Primaris with Blood Angels gene seed in them and 7 decades of fighting experience. So what is Dante's first decree upon finding out that all of the chapters have reinforcements? I'll quote.
Commander Dante has decreed that all Baal-like youths of the right age and gene code are to be immediately inducted as neophytes into one of the chapters of the Blood.
That's right. It doesn't matter the quality. It doesn't matter the bravery. They even, literally, recruit brain-damaged children who previously failed induction. There is a quote I love by Aristotle, which the Blood Angels used to live by, and I'll give to you as it's come to my attention that you all have an IQ smaller than my shoe size, so need some education in your lives. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. The Blood Angels used to recruit excellence, so the Marines were in the habit of excellence. What happens to a chapter when that is no longer true? The Blood Angels' practice is to give neophytes all the gene seed upgrades, aside from the Black Carapace, before even training them. So, with this edict, every single child basically becomes a Space Marine without any sort of screening aside from checking a genetic match. Which means that, as it's based on those that survived, at least a good proportion of them will be cowards who managed to hide. And, because this is how averages work, half of them will be below average intelligence. Welcome to the new Blood Angels, a chapter of cowards and idiots, for whom the habit of excellence is forever out of reach. I'm sure that won't lead them into getting wiped out or tempted to chaos. It may not have stopped them existing right now, but it surely will very shortly.
Oh no, not number 3!
The stupidity of giving gene seed before training. As I mentioned, the Blood Angels fully implant the gene seed and organs into all neophytes. They then force grow these neophytes in pods over the course of a year, so they grow from being used to fully grown Space Marines. This doesn't always work. Some go mad in the pods and have to be put down. Some come out as mutated monsters and get locked up in a tower. Some wake up too early and have to be taken out behind the shed with a shotgun. Which is why I always snooze my alarm. Every single one of them is a waste of gene seed. A reminder, a Space Marine only ever produces 2 gene seeds. So every single failure means 50% of one Marine's gene seed is gone. Even then, neophytes are not Space Marines. They're scouts, with scout armour and no training, who are sent behind enemy lines. The attrition rate will be huge. And every single loss is 1 gene seed lost. They haven't yet grown more gene seed in them, so their loss can't be replaced. And the Blood Angels gene seed is specifically noted as being the most divergent after the Space Wolves, who, if you saw that video, don't actually exist. That divergence brings complications. A high failure rate in procedures to make new Marines. When you couple that with Marines who are lost before their second gene seed can be harvested, and, in extreme cases, before even their first can be, as well as what gene seed gets tithed by Mars, you quickly realise that mathematically, the Blood Angels simply shouldn't exist anymore. They should have been ground down from attrition thousands of years ago.
Number 2.
The Red Thirst. Now we get to the big 2. First up, the Red Thirst. For those that don't know, the Red Thirst is not a genetic flaw. It's a genetic feature. A genetic feature where the Blood Angels want to drink blood. Any blood, from living creatures. They can abstain from it, with great willpower, but it comes at a cost. Drinking blood gives them strength and vitality. It was designed this way, to make them more savage. We learn this from QVO.
The Ark made lots of attempts to repair the damage to your gene seed could not be successful,
said QVO.
Because we were made this way,
asked Dante,
Your propensity for savagery was engineered into your legion,
said QVO.
all the flaw does is exacerbate what is already there. Cause suspects the affliction is spiritual rather than physical.
So the obsession, addiction, need to drink blood is a spiritual corruption, not a genetic one based off their genetic predisposition to savagery. We also see this in the fact that the thirst spreads. When one suddenly starts being overcome by it, others will in sympathy, which would be fine if it wasn't for what the red thirst does. Yes, it makes them quicker and stronger, their need for blood powering them, and the drinking of it pushing them further again. But it also blinds them. It leads them into charging when charging is not the right call. It leads them into disobeying orders. It clouds their thinking. When your sergeants, your captains, even your chapter master have their thinking clouded from the thirst, they won't react well to changes in the battlefield. They'll struggle to come up with plans on the fly. And that's if they can overcome the thirst at all. If they don't, then the plan will just be a headlong charge. And even if they somehow keep on top of it and manage to come up with a coherent plan, the rank and file are prone to losing it and charging forwards anyway. At any given engagement, Marines will be lost because the thirst demands they get in close and slaughter. Whole sections of the battlefield will be lost because they lose control. Plans will fall apart because either the command can't think up the best possible plans, or the troops ignore them, even if this never results in the enemy taking advantage and wiping the Blood Angels from the field, a massive if. The increased attrition rate on top of their problematic gene seed process means that they should never be able to recover in either the time or quantity that we see.
And the number one reason the Blood Angels should not exist?
The Black Rage. Yeah, you all knew it was coming. The psychic curse of the Blood Angels. Well, the other psychic curse of the Blood Angels. Actually, they're also cursed with visions of the future and with being more likely to be psychers. So the other psychic curse of the Blood Angels then. Honestly, by sheer number of psychic curses alone, the Blood Angels should be gone by the 41st millennium. Either way, the Black Rage is where they suddenly believe themselves to be back in the time of the Horus Heresy. They believe themselves to be Sanguinius, or one of the Marines from that time, battling either against Horus directly or his forces. And they can never break free from that. From that moment on, that is all they believe, with the exception of everybody's favourite superpowered Mary Sue, Mephiston. For everyone else in all of Blood Angels history, this is a permanent thing. They get rounded up, their armour painted black, and sent to charge the enemy, with chaplains telling the afflicted that the people opposite really are Horus's troops, so go nuts. So go nuts they do, until they inevitably die, either from the enemy or, if they survive, the chaplain afterwards. The main problem? This is not rare. In fact, it is so common that it becomes a simple maths problem. We know, from the 9th edition codex, that usually a few Marines will fall to the Black Rage, though it's more common than that in later successor chapters. It can also be whole companies. It doesn't say if it's per engagement or per campaign, so let's be generous and say it's per campaign. An average Space Marine will do at least one campaign a year. Their fast strike, hit-hard troops, multi-year campaigns on one planet are notable for that reason. It's far more common for the Marines to go in, get the job done, and leave the rest to the guard. But let's be generous and say it's only one campaign per year for Marines. They also don't commit in full chapter strength. Going from the novels, demi-companies seem to be the most common, often smaller forces again, and a full company committed at company strength is notable for that occurring. By far the most common is a demi-company or below. But again, let's be generous and say that when they're referring to a few falling, it's per demi-company, so 50 Marines, and the demi-company does one campaign a year. So a few, 3 out of 50 Marines, fall into the Black Rage each year. That's 6% of the force. Multiplied across all the chapter, that's 60 Marines a year fall into the Black Rage. Over a decade, that's 60% of its Marines. 600 Marines out of 1,000 have lost their mind every 10 years. No chapter can handle that sort of attrition. Never mind one that has issues with success of its gene seed implantation, that loses Marines to the Red Thirst, making them idiots, that recruits idiots, and one that should have been eaten by the Tyranids. And what goes for the Blood Angels goes double for its successors, who are stated to suffer from the Black Rage at even higher numbers. The Blood Angels shouldn't exist. Their successors shouldn't exist. That they do is an affront to both logic and maths.
The Iron Hands.
When it comes to cowardly Space Marines, you probably think either of the Emperor's claim,
They are my space marines, and they shall know no fear.
Or you realise it for being yet another lie by the zombie vampire lighthouse that is the Emperor, and you think of the Night Lords. But have you ever thought of the Iron Hands being cowards? No, of course you haven't, because you're not one of the 4 people in the world that think of the Iron Hands at all. But you should, because they are cowards. Now that was, I admit, a strong opening. Calling any Space Marine chapter cowards, especially one of the original legions, may sound like it's sailing a little close to clickbait. It slightly is. Not because the Iron Hands haven't been the biggest cowards outside of a lonely grot, they absolutely have, but because they are starting to change now, under the leadership of Ironfather Stronos, currently the leading voice on the Iron Council and their annually elected war leader. That change, though, is slow and opposed, so this viewpoint absolutely still stands. Just of the last 10,000 years or so, it is slightly lessened in the last 100, and yet, even in its lessened state, the cowardice of the Iron Hands has recently damned the entire Imperium. Genuinely, if you've seen my other videos, you'll know I have the evidence to back up my claims. You may not agree with my conclusions, but I definitely have evidence. And not just evidence. I have literally got the words they spoke to confirm it. Or emitted. Look, I'm not sure what the right verb is when it comes to some sort of bionic voice grill thing. But before I go into it, a quick warning. This will include spoilers for the books Eye of Medusa and Voice of Mars, as well as information from codex supplements such as Clan Raucan. And, whilst you're deciding whether that matters to you, I will say that I really enjoyed the Iron Hands lore. Far more than I thought I would. Don't get me wrong, the lore is horrible, they're awful, awful people, but dear gods they embrace the grimdark more than any loyalist chapter I've come across. And I love them for that. Okay, that's enough time for you to decide whether spoilers matter, and that's too close to praising something for my cynical ass. So, on with the insults. As I said, the Iron Hands have to be the most cowardly chapter in the Imperium of Man. Don't take my word for it. Take it from their own teachings. This from Sergeant Tartrak, teaching a neophyte.
Your failure is one of calculus, neophyte. An Iron Hand never enters a fight unless he is certain he will win it.
Give that a moment. An Iron Hand never enters a fight unless he is certain of victory. What would you call someone like that? A hero? A pragmatist? No. You'd call them a coward. Too scared to ever enter battle unless victory was guaranteed. If you think that's just one sergeant, though, you'd be wrong. He is far from the only one.
Never enter a battle unless it is one you cannot lose.
This is a chapter-wide teaching. It is part of their so-called Iron Creed. So that would rule out small battles, such as the Defence of Terra from Horus, protecting Baal or Macragge from Tyranids, Armageddon, etc., etc. The list of battles that would have been lost from the Iron Hands being in charge goes on and on. All because they're too scared to enter a battle where the outcome is anything less than certain. Now, it doesn't exactly take a genius to work out where this fear comes from. 10,000 years ago, they were the first legion to lose their Primarch, as Fulgrim beheaded Ferrus Manus at the Dropsite Massacre, and they've been running scared ever since. Scared of everything. Scared of losing, scared of being seen to be weak, scared of allies, scared of making a mistake, scared of their own flesh, scared of their own emotions, pretty much scared of their own shadow at this point. Yes, some of it is down to demonic influence, by a Slaaneshi demon known as the Sapphire King, who was born the moment Ferrus Manus lost his head, figuratively and metaphorically. After 10,000 years, that excuse has run out. And besides, my next video will be on how the Iron Hands have been controlled. But how does the death of the Iron Daddy 10,000 years ago still make them scared? His example is used everywhere. They blame him for dying, saying he was weak in a couple of key ways. One, that he let his emotions get the better of him, proving that emotions are weakness, and should be purged. And two, that he trusted people. His trust of Fulgrim led to his death. Therefore, trust is something to be scared of. So that is what they base their Iron Creed around. It is all about survival. Their Primarch was weak, and his weakness killed him. So now they fear death, and fear being weak. to the point that they are scared of everything, including the loyalist chapters of Space Marines. Because Ferrus died trusting Fulgrim, they won't trust other Astartes. As Iron Father Christos said to the Raven Guard Shadow Captain Sten,
We will not fight alongside you, for it is all that we do as Iron Hands to avoid the fate suffered by our Primarch.
it is spelled out here. Again though, this is far from the only place. As a chaplain taught the neophytes,
Pride, passion, trust, these are flaws. Our father trusted his brother Fulgrim. In doing so, he bears equal culpability for his death.
hell, they even have it written into their scriptorium of iron.
You will never trust.
And it is the most quoted part of it. Iron Hands do not trust. They do not trust each other. They do not trust allies. They do not even trust their own flesh. All because they live in a constant fear of someone betraying that trust. Trust scares them witless. Because they're cowards. We all know the phrase, the flesh is weak. And the Iron Hands say it over and over and over again. Bionics is their answer for everything. Aim off by half a degree from perfect, bionic eye for you. Aiming ever so slightly low, bionic hand for you. And why? Because they see the flesh as being weak. A weakness scares them. They try to coach it in terms of strength, that they're rebuilding stronger. But no, it's straight up fear of weakness, of that weakness costing them their lives. And emotions come from the flesh, and emotions are seen as a weakness, to the point that they share squad links that average emotion across the whole squad, and have inhibitors fitted that block too much emotion. Because Ferrus got angry when Fulgrim betrayed him, therefore emotions are weak. That's their entire reasoning. Unfortunately, they seem to have forgotten that fear is an emotion too. Now, if you're seeing a problem with interlinking thoughts and emotions in a universe where chaos corrupts via emotion, congratulations, you're smarter than an Iron Hand. But these guys are so scared of ending up like their dad, a headless plaything for Slaneshi Marines, that they'd rather risk whole squads being corrupted by chaos rather than facing their fears. Because, yet again, they're cowards. Now, what do you consider the point of Space Marines? For me, they are the defenders of the Imperium, sent to either defend a world or to conquer it. To be fair, I do think them spending their time defending a hive stupid. That's the job of the Guard. The Marines are fast hitters, capable of decapitating a command from its army in one fell swoop. What I don't consider them is looters. Too scared of actually taking the fight to the enemy that they'll just pop down, kill a few attackers, loot whatever technology they can, then sod off. Anyone want to take a guess at what the Iron Hands did at the planet Dawnbreak? They popped down, killed a few Eldar, told the Catachans good luck with your defence, then flew off with a bunch of looted tech. And that fear of engagement is constant. Their Marines are frequently too scared to launch boarding tubes when ordered, holding back to let other Marines go first so they take the defences on beforehand. They stand back, watching allies get slaughtered, just so that they have to fight less enemy when the enemy are finally done killing their allies. Their command structure is a council. Is it a council because they feel they make quicker, better decisions as a group? Given that one debate lasted 150 years and was only ended by the person they were debating joining Slanesh, let's assume not. It exists simply because they're scared to let any one person lead them. After Ferrus Manus died, they basically said, no more kings. Losing the last one was too upsetting, and they feared getting upset again, so formed a council instead. One that is basically ruled by chaos-corrupted Admech. But more on that next video. And the council chamber is buried deep under the ground of Medusa. Because, and I quote from the Clan Rauken supplement,
The chapter could not, after all, risk further harm befalling those that would lead it.
These metallic soldiers are scared of an ouchie for their leaders. Seriously, is there nothing in the galaxy they're not scared of? They're certainly scared of women and children, to the point that a 95% civilian casualty rate is considered acceptable, if it means less losses for the Iron Hands, or when a small Slaneshi cult formed on one planet. So they killed every civilian in not just that star system, but other surrounding ones, because mortal women and children are scary. Their way of making war shows their fears just as well. They use carefully constructed battle calculi to work out the most effective way of killing the enemy. That sounds fair enough. Unfortunately, that calculi is done in a way that minimises Iron Hand deaths, but puts no weight to any other Imperium force, because they are scared of getting hurt. But you may consider that fair enough. However, the moment they face an enemy that surprises them, we realise just how scared of even thinking these less than super soldiers really are. If something occurs that the battle calculi didn't expect, these cowards simply stop what they're doing, mid-battle, and crunch the numbers for a new plan. They basically shut down until they know what their next step should be. We see this happen a few times, in their attack on Thenos, in Eye of Medusa, or when they're facing an Orc invasion alongside the Raven Guard. They basically stopped mid-battle because they're too scared to think for themselves. Too scared to get something wrong. And that fear of getting something wrong has damned the Imperium. Their fear is literally to blame for the Citradix Maledictum being formed, for Abaddon nearly making it to Terra. Why? Because they had put their machine brains to understanding the logic of various Black Crusades and Chaos incursions. They had seen the pattern. They knew the exact day and time that Abaddon would launch the 13th Black Crusade. That small incursion that tore the Imperium literally in two. Did they share this information so that the Imperium could be secured when it needed it the most? Did they? Balls. They were too scared of being wrong, of being seen to be wrong. So they kept this information to themselves. Half of the Imperium is cut off in the light of the Astronomicon because of their fear. Untold worlds now corrupted by chaos because the Iron Hands were scared. The Imperium is damned, an Imperium they could have saved if they hadn't been such cowards. But that, above all things, is what defines the Iron Hands. Sheer, complete, and overwhelming cowardice. So I say again, the Iron Hands are cowards. They have been for 10,000 years, and they remain so to this day.
The Ultramarines.
You know them, you have strong feelings about them, one way or another. It's the turn of James Workshire's favourite creation, the Ultramarines. The Ultramarines present a problem for this series. Not because insulting them is hard, God knows it's not, but because they've had every insult under the sun. I like to think I take a different tack to most when it comes to critiquing a chapter's lore. I like to expose the lies of a chapter, which is often hidden under what they claim to be a strength, but is really just another version of the Spartan myth, such as pointing out that the Imperial Fists couldn't defend a sandcastle from a toddler. I'm not such a fan of parroting the same old insults that chapters already get. Even when calling the Dark Angels traitors, I took a very different angle. But the Ultramarines, they have so much lore as to be nearly impenetrable. Any issue is contradicted in another book. Any insult has been made 10 times over. Then it hit me. What is the central thesis of the Ultramarines? The guiding principle that Guilliman had since the start of the Great Crusade, that guided them whilst he had a nap, and has continued now that he's back. He wanted the Ultramarines to not just be soldiers. He was, and is, grooming them for more. To be governors and advisors, to lead the Imperium in peace as well as war. As Uriel Ventris says to Guilliman in Dark Imperium,
We strive to be more, to be wise men who would govern fairly, for the good of the greatest number, as you taught in the great days. We are statesmen still.
Aside from it sounding like the blue of the Ultramarines is uncomfortably close to the blue of the Tau, and their greater good, it lays out exactly what Guilliman dreams for his Smurf sons. He has, however, failed. He has failed spectacularly, which is hardly a surprise. It's not like he's any good at it either. Quick warning on spoilers, this will feature spoilers for the trilogy of Dark Imperium, Plague War and Godblight, as well as the novel Nightbringer, the first book in the Ultramarines omnibus on Uriel Ventris. Now, on with the insulting. I know that claiming the 13th tool, Primarch, is awful at governing seems rather against what we're told. Rabute Guilliman is meant to be the master of logistics, the ultimate XL power user. Hell, even I've nicknamed him Big Clippy. Never mind that he's also Regent of Imperial Sanctus and the Lord Commander of the Imperium. Let's also not forget that he had arguably the most successful legion in the times of the Great Crusade. Why, then, do I say he's rubbish at governing? Well, it's all down to the Plague Wars. This was a fight on his own turf. Mortarion, Typhus, and the Death Guard had invaded Ultramar, the place with his most impressive infrastructure, where he had the most influence, and yet he continually failed to govern its defence, and not only hamper their efforts, but full-on sabotage them. I'd argue he was doing a better job at helping Nurgle than Mortarion was. Let us start with the Garden World of Ajax. Apparently Guliman's favourite planet. He decided to turn it into a hospital planet, and the book tells us to marvel over the efficiency of its setup, just before Nurgle takes over it, and it turns out to be the most important planet to its plans. You see, Guliman, in his infinite ability to govern, had decreed that any soldier who was injured or ill was to be brought back to full health on Ajax, so they could fight again on the front lines. From Dark Imperium.
Upon Ajax, the lesser sect recuperated along with the injured. Some of the diseases unleashed on Ultramar could be treated under medium-range quarantine conditions with standard medicines. Others required specialist care, up to and including Adeptus Ministorum-approved exorcism. As few people as possible were euthanized. If they could be helped, they were. This, it was said in Ultramar, was the difference between Guliman and the Emperor's mercy.
They called this Guliman's mercy. I call it his idiocy. Now, it only takes a few brain cells to see why sending the sick to a planet to recover, when you're fighting the god of disease, is probably a bad idea, which is why both you and Guliman failed to make the connection. Sure, they kept the worst of the sick in orbit and scanned those that were to come down, but it was inevitable that this system would fail. The almighty powers of organisation allowed those infected with Nurgle maggots to come down to the planet. Hell, they even allowed a sick man with an obsession for counting, you know, the Plague Bearer's whole shtick, down planetside. Presumably, they just thought him honouring the Primarch of spreadsheets with his numbers. Inevitably, those infected essentially got possessed by Plague Bearers, who opened a tear in reality and let the demons of Nurgle in. Who could have seen that coming? Aside from any idiot with two brain cells to rub together anyway. Which rules Guliman out. A sensible plan would be for the hospitals to be fleet-based, so that, should any one ship be compromised, it could be fired at a convenient sun. But that would be a competent plan, so not fitting for the semi-divine governor of what are now plague worlds. I mean, this is a man who sends a historian to Macragge to find out the true histories, just after he shut the library and banned anyone from going in there because he was terrified of anyone finding out the true history of Imperium Secundus, which was in one book that he could easily have destroyed. Unsurprisingly, the historian finds that book anyway, after Nurgle's second favourite Great Unclean One shows him the way. Yeah, amazing planning. It seems, across all three books, the only planning he does manage to do well is his plans to throw himself a party. In ancient Rome, there was a tradition called a triumph, a celebration of a commander that achieved notable victories for Rome. Being the Roman cosplayer that he is, Guliman decided to throw himself one after defeating some word-bearers in a no-mark space battle above a no-mark world. Never mind that there were over 100 war zones in Ultramar alone, that there were battles all over Imperial Sanctus, and he hadn't even been to Imperial Nihilus at this point. Never mind that he gathered huge numbers of Space Marines, Chapter Masters, and even High Lords of Terror for this shindig when they should have been doing their actual jobs. Never mind Mortarion was literally walking the worlds of Ultramar. No, he wanted his triumph, come what may, because that is governing. He claimed it was to show him breaking up his unnumbered sons, so that everyone would know he wasn't building a legion. Let's ignore that. As Lord Regent, he has complete control over pretty much every part of the Imperium. That is, Gene Senior is responsible for something like 55% of all Space Marine chapters, most of whom pledge allegiance to him, so this meeting of the great and good proves nothing. Instead, let's realise this was a meeting that could have been an email. But an email doesn't get the most important members of the Imperium gathering to celebrate Guilliman's triumph. He was having his party, and be damned with the consequences. That's the Imperium's genius leader for you. It's amazing anyone turned up, though. He can't usually get people to do what he wants. He chose his militant apostolic, essentially his chief priest, because he was someone Guilliman felt he could trust. And that priest, Matthew, repaid him by saving Guilliman's life and plans. Twice. So a good choice then, and I'm sure Guilliman was grateful. No. Twice Matthew arranged events so that the power of the Emperor could save Guilliman, by going completely against Guilliman's orders. The first time, he sent a conduit of the Emperor's power to Guilliman when he was to confront Mortarion. He sent her with a battle sister. Guilliman was trapped by Mortarion and about to be killed by the time the sister and the conduit girl got there. She used her power to free him and helped push back the Death Guard, dying in the process. Guilliman had the sister executed and bollocked Matthew. Matthew then heard Guilliman's plans to destroy the Cauldron of Nurgle, realised they were bloody stupid, and marched an army off to do it himself, going against Guilliman's orders. Thankfully, he succeeded where Guilliman's plans failed. Whilst Matthew was getting the job done, Guilliman was going 0 for 3 in fights against demon Primarchs. Then this Call, he tried ordering Call to join him in Imperial Nihilus. It didn't work. Call Inferior simply said, "No thanks," and ignored Guilliman's orders. He couldn't even get a computer to do what he told it. Or the Grey Knights. When facing a Nurgle invasion, you'd think them rather a potent weapon. And they briefly were, driving off Typhus and saving the life of Guilliman when, quite frankly, it was impossible to do so. Their plot armour was the difference between Ultramar existing and Guilliman being little more than a greasy blue tin smear on a planet, from a massive space fortress blowing him up. However, the super-smart statesman then made the Grey Knight, the one who had made Typhus run away crying, act as a bodyguard whilst he questions a demon host. Rather obviously, the Grey Knights were horrified by this, and immediately noped out of Ultramar, leaving Guilliman to it despite his supposed authority. Not that he's any better when people do actually listen to him. Marneus Calgar was, at one point, the spiritual liege of all Space Marines. Thank you, Matt Ward. If he still is, then Guilliman has turned the Space Marines into something very bitter indeed. Calgar is a broken man, seeing insults everywhere, and it's all thanks to Guilliman. And Guilliman doesn't even know that he's doing it. Tell me, if you were Calgar, how would you feel when you hear this from Guilliman?
For now I come to your aid. When I depart, this realm will be better defended, better organised, and more resilient than it has been for many generations.
Calgar felt the remarks were a criticism directed at him, and he was right. Guilliman was utterly throwing him under the bus to heap glory on himself. To be fair, though, Calgar does deserve throwing under the bus. Yes, it's time to insult the spiritual liege, the Grand Master of the Ultramarines, Papa Smurf himself. This genius of a governor, whilst Ultramar was being attacked by Mortarion, the Death Guard and demons, felt it his responsibility to send in Terminators to deal with some kids who were rebelling and asking for more food and heating. The chief of his mortal intelligence services suggested that maybe these super rare walking tank suits might be better deployed doing other things during a system-wide chaos invasion, so Calgar essentially told him to take a long walk off a short pier. Then, not learning from his dad's mistakes on Ajax, he decides that he'll execute the ringleaders, but the rest were to be reintegrated. These were kids who rebelled during a Nurgle invasion and who had a bioweapon. Does that not set off any alarm bells in the head of the Ultramarines chief governor? Apparently not. This is the same governor of Macragge that decided to not bother putting any guards in unused parts of the Ultramarine stronghold, because the enemy were never going to break in with the weak forces that they have. His victim complex, meaning he saw Nurgle's attempts to win with rubbish troops, as a personal insult. Now, I don't know if you know this, but demons can be summoned all over the place, especially on worlds where Nurgle's power is strong. Calgar does know this. Calgar doesn't think it worth paying attention to. because Calgar is an idiot. So imagine, if you will, my complete lack of surprise when Nurgle demons are summoned in the areas of the stronghold where he has no guards. Remind me not to ask him to act as an advisor for any planet I'm defending, or any Ultramarine, come to that. Uriel Ventress is an Ultramarine captain, so you'd think he'd know a thing or two about advising people on defence. You'd think wrong. This, from Uriel Ventress's point of view, in Nightbringer.
The city walls were high and sloped onwards towards an overhanging rampart. He could see grenade dumpers worked into the machicolations and power field generators studded along its length. The cities of Ultramar did not need such technological trinkets to defend themselves. No, they had stronger defences, courage, honour, and people that embodied the best examples of all human nobility.
This, I'll remind you, is before Guliman's return, before Ventress himself went to Guliman begging him to forget his party and return to Ultramar because he'd lost planet after planet. As advisors go, he's proven to be utterly useless and delusional. After all, he insists that Ultramar
follows the Primarch's meritocratic ideals.
The same meritocratic ideals that allowed him to get an automatic spot at the most prestigious training school for Ultramarine induction. Automatic because of skill? No. Automatic because an ancient member of his family was a hero of the Ultramarines. Meritocracy my arse. These delusional would-be super-statesmen are as nepotistic as the Habsburgs, just with better chins. And he's about as smart as any nepotistic choice tends to be. When faced with working out who the human working with the Dark Eldar is, both he and an Inquisitor don't think it worth investigating a noble who was captured by the Dark Eldar, tortured, and then somehow engineered a daring one-man escape, who stood to profit from all the events that were happening, and was essentially a moustache-twirling villain. Later, when faced with the prospect of an old law, Catan, being awoken, the Nightbringer, he says no to exterminating the planet, and instead launches a raid at where the man was. He wasn't there anymore. So he works out where he is, and raids there instead. Too late to stop the Nightbringer being awoken. Rather than try stop the Nightbringer, he instead decides to stop the Nightbringer from getting his old ship. You may think that fair enough. He doesn't know what a Catan is. Except he did. This was after getting a glimpse of the Catan's mind and knowing what the creature had done to the galaxy for eons. Stopping the ship returning more important than stopping a Catan? Nah, he knew it wasn't. It's just that the only way of stopping the Catan required Ventress to die too. And he couldn't have that. And somehow all that was meant to be an example of how he's a good captain and governor. Was it hell? These Ultramarines are bloody delusional. From their Primarch to their Chapter Master, from the lowliest soldier to their captains. They aren't statesmen. They aren't governors. They're just self-serving, glory-hogging idiots who shouldn't be allowed to be in charge of a birthday party.
The Salamanders.
In the galaxy of the 41st millennium, there are only stupid space marines. This is the 8th video in the series, and not once have I found a chapter with any sense at all. And the Salamanders? They're no exception. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that the Salamanders are the stupidest marines yet. Is it because they're the so-called good guys of the Imperium? Hell no! They're not even the good guys. But we'll do that next video. This is because, if you combine the brain power of all the Salamander Marines, then you'd be lucky to have it add up to just one functioning brain. Aside from my boy Barkin, I'll not hear a bad thing said about him. As I said, the Salamanders are unbelievably stupid, from the lowliest scout to their entire chapter tactics, from their sergeants to their chapter master. These guys are considerably duller than the flames they're so obsessed with. Which brings me nicely to my first point.
Reason 1. Flamers are stupid.
Controversial, and I don't mean it completely. In certain situations, they make a lot of sense. But for Salamanders, flamers are their main specialist weapon, their main heavy weapon, and the main weapon on many of their tanks. The problem with that? It frequently doesn't work. In the vacuum of a Space Hulk? Nope. Planets with the wrong mix of gases? No, not going to work. Or yes, but works far too well. Aliens or demons that like high heat? Only if you like tickling them. Flame-proof sealed armour? Nope. Your squad mates near something explosive? Think again. And it's not like Space Marines fight near explosive oil refineries, ships filled with oxygen pipes or chemical factories, right? Oh. Flamers are a specialist pick for a limited number of circumstances. They should never be a go-to weapon. But, in 10,000 years, this idiot of a chapter never thought to learn that lesson.
Reason 2. Recruitment failures.
Here's a tip for the salamanders. If you select only for physical ability, you only get physical ability. They do roughly 0 psychological screening of their marines, but a massive amount of physical screening. How else do you end up with a moustache-twirling villain as a sergeant? Meet Yeagon. As a child, he was a completely sadistic psychopath. Think Erebus, but somehow with less charisma. Yes, I heard you swearing at your screen when I put Erebus's photo up. I agree with you. They let Yeagon become a Marine anyway. Predictably, he then, amongst other highlights, blackmailed an apothecary, killed a captain, and then joined the Chaos Warband, the Dragon Warriors. The thing is, everyone knew he was a sadistic psychopath, but no one seemed to care. They just promoted him instead. Or Nihillan, the leader of the Dragon Warriors, who was previously a knowledge-obsessed salamander librarian no one trusted, but didn't actually stop. This isn't just a fault of the past. They're still at it. When a bunch of aspirants were trapped in a lava flow whilst on training exercise, Cade, one of the aspirants, killed one of the others and tried to kill a second, just to give himself an ever so slightly better chance of survival. This is some Iron Hands level bullshit. They don't care about the mental side at all. The salamanders only care about the physical. The question is, aside from those that turn traitor, does that lack of mental screening come back to bite them at all? Yes it does. Sugan is, arguably, the protagonist of the novels. Sugan is an unhinged masochistic psychopath, and, I strongly suspect, one of the stars of my next video. He has decided he hates a fellow sergeant, Dakir, because Dakir is a commoner, whereas Sugan noble-born. He hates him so much that when Dakir relays orders from Sugan's captain, Sugan simply decides he's not taking orders from a commoner and goes on doing what he was doing, which leads to a bunch of Marines dying, and that's just the third company.
Reason 3. Somehow more recruitment failures.
So who, then, is to blame for all this stupidity? If you were to ask the salamanders, they'd probably blame the drop site massacre on Istvan. If you ask anyone with half a brain, which rules the salamanders out, they'd say the leaders of the salamanders. But let's start with Istvan. Apparently, is to blame for the fact that, 10,000 years later, there's still not a full fighting force. From the omnibus.
Only 60 scouts represented the full fighting strength of the 7th. A throwback to the devastation wrought in the ill-fated Istvan V assault that nearly destroyed the Legion as it was then, and was still felt some 10,000 years later.
No. You can't blame Istvan for you failing to recruit enough troops, and for you failing to screen them psychologically. Istvan was 10,000 years ago. That's like you blaming your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather for you forgetting to put the bins out. It makes no bloody sense.
Reason 4. Chapter Master Tushon, the Empty-Headed.
Chapter Master Tushon is apparently a hero. He is also blatantly an idiot. When ordering down an orbital strike at his location, the chief librarian suggests that they run. Tushon suggests that, instead, they hide under a partly demolished Land Raider, to which the librarian says, good idea, and then immediately teleports himself away, leaving Tushon to deal with the ramifications of his supposedly good idea. Now, it may surprise you, but if we look at the scale of a Space Marine battle barge and a Land Raider, you'll realise that an orbital strike from the giant space city is very likely to be able to destroy what is essentially a well-armoured tractor. It would be like asking the lion to fight a snotling. Yeah, sure, technically, there's a small chance that the snotling survives, but not in this reality. Unless he throws on a cloak and pretends to be a watcher. then the lion would just give it tummy tickles. Cosplay and startlings aside, it may not shock you to learn that, whilst Tushon's plot armour saves him, he does get thrown hundreds of metres and trapped under a tank, to which his response was to think,
The orbital lance strike hit harder than I expected.
"It's an orbital lance strike, you blithering half-wit. What did you expect? A pea shooter?" He also found a prophecy concerning what is now one of his librarians, Dakir. Let me ask you a question. If you were the Salamander's chapter master, and you found a prophecy stating that one of your marines will either doom or save the chapter, would you A. kill him, hoping you saved the chapter, B. keep him around, hoping he will save the chapter, or C. lock him in a dungeon for months whilst you do nothing, thereby doing your best to try turn the prophesied one against you, and then let him loose only because the enemy you're attacking, which is presumably when he's most likely to doom or save the chapter? If you picked option C, congratulations, you're smart enough to be a Salamander chapter master.
Reason 5. The chief librarian, who I doubt can read.
To be fair to the chief librarian, Velcona, he was willing to make a decision. Unfortunately, his decision was to kill Dakir, the only one who did anything of use to save the planet from, and I kid you not, a few hundred Chaos Space Marines and some mercenaries. We'll come back to that. And his justification for such an action? A 10,000-year-old prophecy from Vulcan. Fair enough. But when the chapter hero, Vulcan Hestan, no relation, points out that Dakir may be related to a different 10,000-year-old prophecy, he simply states,
There are countless prophecies that speak of our father's return, but we cannot trust any of them to come to pass. We must look to ourselves, not fate 10,000 years old, for our survival.
That's on the same page where he was condemning Dakir to death from a 10,000-year-old prophecy. Pick a lane, you ogre-brained simpleton.
Reason 6. The apothecaries don't care.
Maybe the apothecaries are better. Well, certainly not Emic, who, upon a meteor exploding, showering everywhere in rain and death, and an invasion happening at the same time, decides to strip naked and look in the mirror for a bit before going to help. I'm not kidding. That's what he does. And when he does turn up, does he help the hundreds of injured? Does he balls? He realises a Black Dragon Marine he'd had locked up has gone missing and immediately runs off to look for him instead. It's not like treating the injured during a battle is going to be of use, is it?
Reason 7. The First Company. First amongst idiots.
And don't get me started on the First Company, a group of Marines so stupid that they decide Batman walking up a wall, without a rope, is the best way to go when mid-battle. Is it because they know it's the best way to go? No. The sergeant felt the plan audacious enough to be fun, because job enjoyment is what matters most when you're trying to save the world. Unsurprisingly, it ends with them getting shot off the wall and relying on Dakir, who they had no idea of and didn't care about, to turn into a reverse comet, shooting up from Nocturne and delivering a flaming headbutt to the ship. And that's the First Company's entire contribution to the defence of Nocturne. Go onto the enemy ship, get shot to shit, then shot out into space. Just what I want for my most experienced troops wearing the most advanced walking tank armour, whilst I'm defending my world. Thanks for trying, guys, I guess. And do you know what their pre-battle ritual is? You'd assume it was something to do with fire. Quick and to the point. No. When faced with an invasion that included a literal planet-killing weapon that was pointed at Nocturne, they took the time out of the day to stand in a circle and, to quote the omnibus,
Pray to Jessica Persephone, a survivor of grim wounding at the hands of the Dark Eldar, who brandished his vambrace. Upon it, as with every fire drake who mustered in the armorium, were inscribed the names of every fallen hero of the First. Beginning with Persephone, a name was uttered aloud, so that each of this vaunted brotherhood would be remembered before battle. A great, long list of honour was recounted, each name given with zeal and fiery bombast. As was ritual, Praetor went last, but spoke the final warrior's name with quiet melancholy. Zek Sugan. Let him return to the mountain, and the circle of fire be remade.
So, for clarity, when dealing with the imminent destruction of their planet that they were, in theory, central to stopping, they waited to have a group cry about their losses instead, by reading the name of every dead member of the first company in a history of 10,000 years. First responders, these are not.
Reason 8. Basic defence is too complex.
Not that there should have been an invasion to defend from. They have a massive orbital laser called the Eye of Vulcan, one of his legendary relics. They should be able to shoot down anything that comes at them. Do I need to point out the utter stupidity that having a single point of failure in a planet's defences is? Which is why, logically, it was targeted to be taken out by the Dragon Warriors, the Chaos Warband doing the invading, before they invaded. The Salamanders knew the enemy would be attacking and were on high alert. Guess how many guards were positioned both outside and inside the control room for the weapon? If your guess was higher than 0, then I'm afraid you're too smart to be a salamander. 0 guards at the control of the one weapon that changes Nocturne from being easy to invade to being pure suicide.
Reason 9. The chapter of blacksmiths can't blacksmith.
Let's be clear, Nocturne was easy to invade. The invasion was a few hundred Chaos Space Marines and a bunch of mercenaries. And yet still, ammo at the defensive points of entire cities had to be strictly rationed. They'd had months to prepare. How the hell does the homeworld of a first founding chapter, famed for its smithing skills, not have enough ammo to kill the scale of an invasion that a hive world would just call a normal gang warfare on a quiet day? The only answer to that is sheer unbelievable failures from both High Command and its warriors. If the Tyranids attacked Nocturne instead of Macragge or Baal, they'd have wiped out the Salamanders in time for lunch, which is apt. But it seems I'm wrong on one thing. Istvan is still a major problem for them. For the only explanation I can think of for how stupid the Salamanders are is that any salamander with a functioning brain died on that infamous planet, and those who survived were only those with single-digit IQs that passed on their lack of thinking ability via their gene seed. Aside from my boy Barkin, he's perfect just as he is.
The Raven Guard.
The role of the Raven Guard in Warhammer 40k lore is simple. Their role is to be cannon fodder. Every Space Marine chapter has a role, a niche. For the Imperial Fists, it's defending things. For the Space Wolves, it's destroying things. And for the White Scars, well, it's aura farming. So what then is the niche of the Raven Guard? Traditional wisdom will tell you it's been sneaky buggers, striking for the shadows to cause mass panic, derail plans, and assassinate enemy leaders. Traditional wisdom is wrong. For the Raven Guard, it's very simple. Their job is to die. Ideally, in a way to make others seem more dangerous or grimdark. They are, in essence, the Space Marine equivalent of the Eldar's Avatar of Cain. If a story needs a force or character to die to make them seem more powerful, the Raven Guard are more than happy to step up. Or, more accurately, more than happy to fall down. For a first founding chapter, we knew little of the people involved in the upper echelons of the Bird Botherers, not counting the future, and now former, Chapter Master Shrike. For a long time, we didn't even know the name of the Chapter Master. Now, given the premise of this video, anyone want to take a guess as to how we get introduced to him? If you guess by him romping to victory by means of heroic deeds, you're missing the point. In the Damocles Warzone supplements, we learn that Corvin Severax is the Chapter Master of the Raven Guard. He plays such a pivotal role in the proceedings that, in the one engagement we see him take part in, he is cut in half by the Tower Commander Shadowsun. That was literally his entire contribution. In the same book we find out his name, we see him taken down to show that Shadowsun is indeed a genius. You see, this supposed chapter of tactical badasses, who are meant to be superb scouts and intelligence gatherers, had been tricked by Shadowsun. She'd had a squad of stealth suits pretend to be her, so Severax swooped in for the kill, took out a nameless trooper, disguised as Shadow Sun, spent too long laughing his head off about it, and was split in twain. He died for the sole purpose of making the Tau in general, and Shadow Sun in particular, look more dangerous. And yes, we all know the stupid story of what the Tau thought they achieved by killing Sevrax, but I'll cover that next video. Now, if losing a Chapter Master wasn't enough, the same two supplements we see Sevrax's replacement, Shrike, fall for a similar trick. He and Khosrow Khan, who you may remember as the speed junkie from my White Scars video, led a combined force of Raven Guard and White Scars into attacking the Tau. Well, not actually the Tau. He led them into attacking a bunch of holograms, at which point the Tau opened fire, killing huge numbers of both White Scars and Raven Guard, including the Raven Guard librarian Zortake, who was introduced to us posthumously and was, at the time, the only named librarian the Raven Guard ever had. And why did so many Raven Guard die? Simply to show that Farsight was a tactical genius. Because that is the point of the Raven Guard. But let's leave those supplements aside for a moment and revisit the novels of the White Scars Omnibus. Shrike and Khosrow are there as well, and in it we learn that the Raven Guard have something of a hatred for the Sons of Jagatai. It seems that they were on an operation together before the events of that novel, and when the plan called for the White Scars to reinforce the Raven Guard, the White Scars didn't bother as they were too preoccupied with their main job of aura farming, leaving the Raven Guard to die. Why did they do that? Honestly, at this point, I'm pretty sure it's because Games Workshop likes two things. 1, making the White Scars look stupid, and 2, killing Raven Guard. We certainly see more of point 2 in the Iron Hands novels we covered for their video. Desperate to make the Iron Hands seem as grim dark as it's possible to be, the Raven Guard forces on the Imperial world of Dawnbreak are wiped out to a man against an orc weird warg. They really shouldn't have been. Not only were they supported by the Iron Hands, but the Iron Hands were in the field next to them. The Iron Hands watched them die without so much as lifting a finger to help. Just standing back to let the orcs wipe out the Raven Guard, calculating it would make the orcs easier for them to kill. So the Raven Guard died, just to make the Iron Hands seem more grimdark. Then there's the novel Shrike, which I touched upon, admittedly from a very different perspective, in my video on the most fun orc that ever crumped. Seriously, go watch that video after this. Barely anyone seems to have, but I found it funny as hell. In that book, we see some of the most weird power balancing I have ever seen. Essentially, a squad of 10 Raven Guard assault marines die in quick succession to squads of 10 and then 25 orcs, all whilst these supposed masters of stealth utterly fail to sneak around a couple of orc lookouts. Only 3 marines remain, and then one more of them dies, and they need a mountain falling on their heads to save Shrike from being curb-stomped by the war boss. And in the background, the bulk of the Third Company is dying off quickly in a failed surgical strike on the Orc HQ. This is all from the novel that's meant to be showing us what a badass Shrike really is. Like I said in my last video, the novel was completely stolen by Gorecrusher, an orc that wasn't even a point of view character. And then we see them die to show that birds are badasses. Yeah, these bird botherers absolutely have no place bothering birds. In the book, Sons of Korax, we get a bunch of short stories, my favourite of which is actually the first one, Prey. In it, we follow the Raven Guard chaplain Kordai, who, wearing only a loincloth, is hunting down one of the giant rocks, massive eagle-like birds that live on Kievar. Not only do we learn that he was tricked by the bird, yet again showing the Raven Guard's ability to fall into a trap that even a bird brain can devise, but that many other would-be chaplains of the Raven Guard not only failed to hunt one of these down, but had been killed in the process. He passes, and I quote,
Many of his brothers, and had seen the evidence of their decomposing corpses, dashed onto the rocks and half frozen by the altitude.
So the Raven Guard have many would-be heroes of the chapter die simply to prove that hunting birds is dangerous work? And then there's the novel Apocalypse, where an unnamed Primaris Raven Guard is hunting down word-bearers and their cultists after the battle on the planet had already been won. He comes across a former prince, and now in the early stages of possession, Chaos follower, and, rather than simply kill him from the shadows, he emerges to end him, only to take forever to do so, and have a word-bearer sneak up behind him and kill him. Out-stealthed by a word-bearer, and out-pistol drawn by a human that didn't know he was there to begin with. In fact, the entire presence of the Raven Guard in that novel could be described as being there to die. Yeah, sure, some did survive, but many died on a mining moon, and off-screen they lost most of their ships, and the Marines on them, trying to buy the Imperial Fist's time. Because that is the entire point of the Raven Guard. They exist to die. They are the cannon fodder GW uses when they need something to look badass or grimdark. Which is a shame, as there's much I genuinely love about the Raven Guard. Not their haircuts, obviously, but their determination to act as Marines rather than basic soldiers is exactly what Space Marines should be doing. But, as they are, they're just made to die. If you've made it this far, fair play, that is one hell of an effort. In which case, it might be worth you checking out my 40k conspiracy theories, covering such things as the Space Wolves not actually existing, and us getting the meeting with Gudiman and the Emperor completely wrong. In the meantime, see ya!